So the next one, so what were the important events that happened are of some consideration or significance in this time, in this particular period, 16th century England, what Shakespeare inherited, the world Shakespeare is born into. These are the important events that you already know. We have discussed one, the first one we have discussed, that the other few will go into them now in this session, since they are very important events. They impacted both the lives of ordinary people and creative writers, artists, writers, musicians, royal personages. So printing press, Reformation, I was just talking about, theater culture, how it all started again in this period, and we did see it also in that picture I presented to you in the beginning of this session. So plague, and plague, when we talk about plague, I'll come back to that because each is explained in detail. Then monarchy and explorations. So these are the few characteristic features of this period, or important things to be noted. So printing press, if we take printing press, the printing press introduced by Caxton in 1476, and we did see and understand how it revolutionized England, liberalized the spread of knowledge or education in general, how it created the big clan of readers and writers. So books became cheaper because now they are available in abundance. So in bigger quantity, so people don't have to depend on few manuscripts available, because now they are copied faster, they are getting printed, circulated, so they became obviously cheaper. So literacy expanded because it created more readers. Knowledge liberalized, circulated widely. There were more readers, more intelligent people, more access to all the knowledge, and which was perhaps limited for a class of people till then. When it was written in Latin scriptures, they all remained elusive from the access of ordinary people. So classical texts, that is what religious debates, classical texts always refer to some extraordinary texts which had some wisdom necessary for greater kind of ventures, accomplishments, and even trading and manufacturing ships and other such things, like perhaps our Vedas. So religious debates and new ideas spread rapidly. Press created the league of people who are more informed, who are more aware, or more intelligent. So English language also gained popularity because of that, because English was the language of commoners. There were more people to take if they were written in English. All this laid foundation for Shakespeare's audience, because he wrote not for the kings and queens, but for the ordinary people. So his audience were, of course, when he had the patronage of few royal people like Duke of Pembroke, Earl of Pembroke and Earl of Southampton, he had to write for them. But most of his works were meant for ordinary people. So they were aimed at entertaining them or luring those people into the theaters. So rise of modern literature, modern to that period. Though there is no direct reference to printing press, the impact of it can be seen. I have just quoted a few lines from his place to show the influence of printing press, or the kind of changes that were happening during that period. So Tempest from Act 1 and Scene 2, from mine own library with volumes that I prize above my dukedom, Prospero's speech. So he has books, though he was into a kind of black magic, learning witchcraft or black magic, still the knowledge obtained from books only. And his loyal servant Gonzalo, in fact, sends the necessary books, hides those books in the ship or whatever, that broken boat that they were abandoned in midst of sea, hoping that it would come to use, or it would be of help to Prospero, who had great fascination for that. And it proves to be of greater help once he lands on that particular island and he becomes a magician. So So he respects the book, and it all happened again. That is the reflection of the attitude of this particular people of England during the period when the knowledge was liberalized and books were produced. Printing press was in full swing, working in full boom. So again, another quotation I quoted to justify this: knowledge is the wing wherewith we fly to heaven. So this again shows common man's quest for knowledge. How people were very enthusiastic and inquisitive to learn things. And in one of our sessions, when I showed you the picture where inquisitive onlookers are looking into some books displayed by a street book seller or vendor, right? So this was a spirit of the period. Knowledge is the wing wherewith we fly to heaven. So that was a great belief that they had. Knowledge can redeem them from ordinary living. It can elevate them to greater things. Though it's an exaggerated saying here, which would take them to heaven. I mean, or they can fly to heaven. Obviously, maybe a state of empowerment and perhaps greater accomplishment and respect and a life of great dignity. That is what perhaps he is referring to here. So, if that was about printing press, another important thing of this period is Reformation. I was talking about. I've already told you what has really what had happened during this period, Reformation, though it was not a positive thing because it begot more chaos, more confusion, and more unrest among people. So English Reformation began when Henry broke from Rome and he establishes his own church. So that shattered religious unity because he was an ardent Protestant. So he wanted to turn the entire England into a Protestant community. So all the Catholic churches, monasteries, and whatever the institutions they owned and their properties, all were destroyed, either destroyed or confiscated. So they were just banned or closed down. So closed monasteries and replaced Catholic authority with a national church of England. So that is obviously a Protestant wing. So this upheaval created confusion among people. I told you why people were confused, because of the constant fluctuation in power in the line of kings who ruled England. When Mary assumed power, she went back to Catholicism again. So when Elizabeth came to power, she just revived Protestantism. So there was always this conflict, confusion, confused identity. Where do they belong? There was always this moral conflict and spiritual anxiety that again is reflected in Shakespearean actors, which means character speeches sometimes. A few of them I've quoted here. So Shakespeare's plays reflect this climate through divided consciences. Divided consciences, you can say, like I don't remember the exact line, but I had long translated that particular a speech of Othello in one of my articles, Kannada articles that I had written for Pata paper, tabloid we had started once. I was into many enterprising things, and one of them was starting a tabloid or a newspaper, a weekly newspaper. So it was titled, my conscience had, I had a thousand-tongued conscience, something like that. It runs like that in English, but I had translated that into something like this. ನನ್ನ ಆತ್ಮಸಾಕ್ಷಿಗೆ ಸಾವಿರ ನಾಲಿಗೆ. ನನ್ನ ಆತ್ಮಸಾಕ್ಷಿಗೆ ಸಾವಿರ ನಾಲಿಗೆ. ಒಂದೊಂದು ನಾಲಿಗೆಯು ಒಂದೊಂದು ಕಥೆಯನ್ನು ಹೇಳುತ್ತದೆ. ಒಂದೊಂದು ಕಥೆಯು ನನ್ನನ್ನು ನೀಚ ಎಂದು ಸಾರುತ್ತದೆ. Actually, that was the exact translation of what Shakespeare had to say, but I cannot recollect the exact lines from Othello. So there was this divided conscience, a kind of compromised values, flexible kind of morality So it was not a typical, conventional kind of, value based or morally strict, society or people. So there was this inherent confusion in them, and they themselves cannot decide what is right, what was wrong, and somehow some sort of hypocrisy without their knowledge has sunk into their souls. So that is what is this divided conscience means. So it has become something relative, though this needs to be a static phenomena, conscience. It has become relative, like what is right tomorrow may not stay right to I mean, what is right today may not stay right tomorrow, because of the external circumstances or because of the internal trauma or changes, emotions. So troubled souls, debates on justice and authority. So these were the characteristics of. So in Hamlet, for example, there is a line. Thus, conscience. Actually, we used to pronounce that earlier when in our student life as conscience, conscience. That did sound really well for us. But when we realized the actual pronunciation was little different, conscience, so it does not really go well with me even to this day. Anyway, so conscience does make cowards of us all. So sometimes it becomes a crime to be virtuous. That is what he is trying to say. If you have a conscience, you cannot afford to be cruel. You are expected to be more, merciful, compassionate, and wise, but that proves sometimes very costly for one. That is what he says, and which means because of that conscience, which will not allow you to take brave and courageous decisions, so that will reduce you to be a coward. That was his tragic flaw anyway in Hamlet, his procrastination, that he cannot take quick decisions. That begets his downfall, or you can say all that he faces in his life, ultimately his death. That is why that famous soliloquy, to be or not to be, that inherent confusion. So more needs she the divine than the physician. That is again another different feature of this period, which was brought in because of this Reformation. So, referring to his ailing, wife, Lady Macbeth, Macbeth says, more she needs the divine than the physician, which means her condition, her disease, or whatever that she is suffering from, because she had developed insomnia or schizophrenia, some mental disorder, sleepwalking, kind of condition, and also she is not herself anymore, ridden with guilt and haunted by that perhaps memories, cruel memories, you can say. She needs the divine than the physician, which means this is again a different class of people in England, same England, where there was progressive thinking as well. People were saying, for example, the next line is again an opposite of it, you can say. See, for example, I mean, of course, it reflects the same aspiration here, desire, but it's little different. But I'll come to that later. So here in Macbeth, she needs divine providence, some blessing from God, or some help from Almighty, invisible, authority. These man-made medicines won't cure her disease. So there were both, kind of people who would trust in modern explorations, or modern science, or looking towards some progressive thing, and abandoning all that was taught in church in the form of preachings, or all that religious beliefs, dismissing them as baseless, dismissing them as something that limit a human being of all the great possibilities in life. But there are also people who still resort back to that divinity. And the same to some extent is reflected in Henry V as well, in this quotation: we are in God's hands, brother, not in theirs. And this is actually uh, a kind of a slow rebellion that was forming, or an apparent kind of resistance or a hatred for Roman Catholics, because Catholic churches always tries to impose their authority on people and kings. But here there are people who can identify themselves as rationalists or Protestants. They actually believe in God and His might, but not in the priest preachings, not in the clergyman's words. So we are in God's hand, brother, not in theirs, means not in the hands of clergymen or pastors or some priests of the church. So questioning their authority. These are again the reflection of the spirit of Renaissance period, or this entire period that we are trying to focus.